I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris and Vertex, for their support. CFRI's Executive Director, Siri Vaeth, is sunshine to me. She's a dear friend, and we met after she took on the title at the Cystic Fibrosis Research Institute. I not only consider her a dear friend, but also a mentor, and she's truly among the smartest people that I know. She's a great advocate, not only for her daughter, Tess, who has cystic fibrosis and who is the same age as my oldest daughter, Molly, but she is an incredible advocate for the CF community. And if you need something explained to you legislatively or anything like that, Siri can help you out. She's really good about doing that. She has a master's degree in social welfare. She's fluent in Spanish. She's great at marketing and does a lot of public speaking, and I would have to say is an all-around great person. Welcome, Siri. Always great for us to chat in person or not.
Thank you, Laura. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor and a delight.
It is a delight always to talk, but I just want to start out by asking how Tess is, how she's doing.
Tess is doing well. She is, for those who don't know, my daughter, who is 30 years old now, living with CF, and she is one of the fortunate ones who is benefiting from the new modulator therapy. And so her health has been really stable for the past few years. I will say she just got over, I think it was one of those combo flu COVID situations. And it was fascinating because I said to her, this sounds like we're back in 2019. This is exactly how you sounded, like relentless cough, the chesty sound when she spoke, the sinusy sound. And it was a good kind of reminder of how fortunate she has been in recent years.
Yes, to be on that modulator, I mean, it makes a huge difference. And we always say when we talk about this that we always think of the 10% who don't have it, and we're grateful for Emily's entourage who's leading this charge.
Absolutely. And I think we all of us who are, working in the CF community and leading these groups, like it is this two-sided coin. So on the one hand, the celebration of all the progress that has taken place and the many people we know who are benefiting. And then just a constant reminder to people, we're not done. We have so far to go. And yes, there's the 10%. And then when you do the drill down into the 10%, and you see, oh, actually it's 24% comprised of people of color with more rare mutations. It just, the urgency is there to keep going. And it is really hard. I mean, I know your daughters and my daughter are about the same age. When you've been around for literally now, for me, 30 years in the CF community, I always say Tess was my N of 1 back in 1995 when she was diagnosed, and now I have an N of thousands. And it is a collective grief when you see people who are still struggling, who have no new options. And it's also hard even for those that we know and love who are on modulators, but who it came so late that they already have many other complications and advanced lung disease. So I hate to sound like I'm constantly like, yay! But that really is our community. It is that two-sided coin of celebration and then urgency and sadness that we're not quite there yet, but we're inspired to keep going.
That is so well said, because it's the truth. I mean, and we talk to so many people, including our kids, who still have the mental part of, is this really going to save me, or is this really going to help me? Are we sure? And then what does the future hold? And so many variables to access, even for the people who have it, right? There's so many different variables that we're always dealing with everybody that we help at both of our foundations. So there's so many things to think about, even though it is wonderful, this medication.
For those people whose lung function was already very, high enough to then start using a modulator and then have it even improve, but certainly not worsen necessarily. It is a whole shift. When I texted Tess on her birthday to, happy birthday, 30 years, and her response to me in all caps was, I outlived my expiration date. And it really is something that she has grown up with. I think most people with CF have grown up with this sense of very early mortality. No matter how much I encourage her, look at the research and think things are getting better, all that, ingrained within her was this sense of much shorter life. And I know she is really, that is a whole shift. She's like, wow, I got to do some heavy duty adulting now. This may not be what gets me. And what does that mean? And then combine with that, for many people, survivor's guilt, because they have friends who either, have already passed away or who are still struggling. It's a whole culture shift right now, I think, in the world of CF.
It is. And don't you feel, because when Molly turned 30, I mean, as you said, my oldest and Tess are the same age. She didn't say that. I felt it more myself. Molly, I just thought, wow, we've exceeded it. I mean, did you think about that as well?
Oh, yeah.
Leading up to her 30th, she was in town from London, and, I got these big blow-ups of the 30th number for her and put it in the house, and I couldn't even throw it away until recently, and her birthday was in December, so it was so huge, and I was trying to reel it in, like, don't make such a big deal about it, because she didn't want this over-the-top thing, but I did. And then Emily actually reminded Molly, this is big for Mom. You may not in your mind think it's big, but this is big for Mom. And so that was really interesting to me, that I had to really, realize the difference between how the two of us were handling it. I had to go celebrate somewhere else I still have to, I'm saying, because, I've been calm about it. Like, yeah, just a little birthday, which is how Molly feels. Like, nothing big, just a little family. I don't want anything big. So it's interesting.
Well, years ago, I used to say that a very interesting film would be to go up to people with CF and their parents and say, what's your number? Because almost automatically, people will tell you the number that they were told survival, average age of survival at the time. And, and automatically, just years ago, it doesn't happen as much anymore because it's all over the map. But
right.
But it was a very clear imprinted for most people when they got that horrible news. What was that number? So the dial has moved.
It has, thank goodness. And yeah, for people who have children born today, it's a much better outlook. I mean, much better. Still struggles, obviously, and it depends on so many factors, but there's much more hope and more medication.
Right. And that pipeline, so robust. And I was at a education day last weekend, and there was a whole presentation on nucleic acid-based therapies, which sounds like a mouthful, and people are like, what does that even mean? But basically, like the whole compilation of gene editing, gene replacement, not quite exactly, but still thrown in mRNA therapies. And it was great, presented by a brilliant clinician researcher, Deepika Polaneni. But the question to her from another physician was, this is getting interesting. Like, how do I even know which clinical trial to refer patients to when there is such a robust pipeline? Different strategies, different criteria for inclusion. But how do I help them make the decision about what one is right for them? What an interesting wonderful problem to have. But conversely, it is a problem to have because the numbers of who would be eligible for any of these trials is so small now that when you add up the numbers required for each clinical trial, it becomes very challenging. So that I think is the next interesting, I don't want to say hurdle, but it's exciting. But in itself, how these clinical trials can advance, I think the other thing is just really to help encourage people who haven't participated in clinical trials who might be eligible to just do the research, see if it's something that could fit for them. Maybe this is the time to dip your toes.
Great advice. I would agree. And I wanted to talk about the California fires because you are in California, as I said in the introduction, and CF patients needed things for air purifying and all sorts of different needs. How are those efforts going?
The good news about the fires is that they are now almost fully contained. So thank goodness. But unimaginable. And I know most people across the country have seen the footage. I mean, it was just a wall of embers. There was nothing to be done to stop that when you have 100-mile-an-hour winds. And so, yes, there's the thousands of people who have lost their homes. That's a whole other issue. And then there are the thousands of people who are breathing the most deep toxic smoke. And so Claire's Place Foundation, which is based in LA and, of course, named after Claire Wineland and started by her mother, Melissa Yeager, they have a great fund going on to collect, asking people to donate, and then they are helping families with CF. And it is exactly like that, money to get really high-quality air purifiers, any kind of relief to access people who had to evacuate and weren't able to grab things they needed. They could get a cash grant to help access that right away. So there are, at the Claire's Place Foundation, if you go there, I think it's clairesplace.org, but if you Google Claire's Place, then I'm sure you'll put up the link. People can donate to it. And I was really proud of CFRI and my board of directors because, we typically, we admire you, Laura, and try not to send too many people to you, but you provide financial support to families. And that, we do many, many things we can talk about, but we don't typically give cash grants to people. But we felt so powerless. And I can say personally, I live in an area that was hit by a horrible wildfire. In 2020, I had to evacuate my house for 10 days. And, at the time, my daughter was living with me. And it's so disruptive and so scary. So this hit very close to home. So CFRI did provide a large grant donation to the foundation to help support other families with CF. And we hope people, no matter how small, there's so many places that need assistance right now. But if that is what moves people, Claire's Place is a wonderful place to donate.
And that's what I wanted you to mention because we're so collaborative in this space. You and me and Claire's Place Foundation, Melissa, we did put the link on our website and have shared it on social media just as you have. That is part of it, is that there's no competition among us at all. You support us. We support you, but I'm just so proud of everything CFRI does and is doing and what you did with Claire's Place. It's just wonderful. So, thank you.
And thank you for all you do. And I do love that there are many organizations who are firmly committed to collaboration and uplift. And as I say constantly, I take it for granted that anybody who's engaged with CFRI is likely engaged with other CF-related organizations, from the CFF to the Bonnell Foundation to Rock CF to Boomer Esiason and Emily's Entourage to Bree Strong CF. And that is how it is supposed to be, because the bottom line is, modulators or not, this is a really hard disease. And it's still isolating, financially challenging, physically challenging, emotionally challenging. And everybody deserves to have the ability to find the resource they need. And if we can help link somebody who's in our circle to you or to Boomer Esiason Foundation. That is what we want to do. It helps the entire community. And I think that makes us probably unique among other disease groups.
I think so too. And I have to say, I told you this, but I also wanted to mention it. When you mentioned our mentoring group in your newsletter and we had someone reach out, that was so touching and incredible. And thank you for that. So the mentoring program is so new and getting the word out sometimes is harder. So that really helped us and kind of boosted the program. And now we're moving along. So it's going really well. And then we got a grant for that from Boomer Esiason Foundation. So we are all, I was just trying to make sure I had the right sponsor in my head. But yeah, so it is really a good thing. So thank you again.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Mutual appreciation.
Yes, things change a lot. And by the time this podcast airs, legislation will also have changed a lot. But, there are so many things that we worry about for our rare disease community. What is on the top of your mind right now? Maybe a couple of legislative things that people should know about. I think for us, we're really in tune with it, but sometimes parents who are in the midst of treatments for younger kids, it's harder for them to hear about it. So this is kind of a great way to, talk about what's going on.
Well, top of mind, literally years ago, before we had a very robust advocacy and awareness program at CFRI. But the one thing we were always behind was increasing funding for the NIH, for the FDA. That shouldn't be controversial.
Right.
But that is still top of mind, especially now because, and of course, it's very, very early days, the new administration, and people are still waiting to hear. So I'm glad you prefaced this is not being released tomorrow. So whatever I say now may be completely outdated, but I very much, it's an information gathering time, I would say, in terms of what the outlook is. What will this mean for the Affordable Care Act? What will this mean for funding for NIH grants? What will this mean for the FDA, the CDC? I mean, it's going to be an interesting shift. So that remains to be seen, and we'll be watching that closely, obviously, but would remain steadfast in our belief that grants through the NIH are critical for advancing research, particularly in the rare disease space. And just a reminder to the listeners, rare disease is one that impacts 200,000 people or less in this country, in this huge country, and that there are now 10,000 identified rare diseases. So there can be some, probably the largest rare disease identified group is sickle cell disease, but that's still only about 100,000 people. And, we can get into a whole conversation about diagnosis because I think the number of people with CF, cystic fibrosis, diagnosed in the U.S. is grossly undercounted, I believe.
Right.
But right now we're at 40,000 people.
And it's underdiagnosed because people of color are underdiagnosed.
Absolutely. So we need to circle, and we'll circle back to that because that's a whole other area that we're very focused on. So with that, then you have these diseases that have literally 10 people in the United States. How do you ever think we can advance research when there's very little incentive to pursue that?
And imagine being those parents, even though it's 10, those are 10 families that have no answers.
Absolutely.
And the fear and panic.
Yes. And so, there's the funding. There is, as you've been extremely involved with, the need to establish rare disease advisory councils, in every state in the U.S. And obviously they have different roles in each state, different responsibilities, different levels of funding. But it is still really important to have that voice for people at an official decision-making level. So we, as an organization, we're hoping that movement can continue.
I just wanted to add before you go to the federal level is that when you were saying all the numbers about how many rare diseases and et cetera, 10% of everybody's state approximately has people with a rare disease. So in Michigan, it's 1 million. And how many in California?
Over 4 million.
Wow.
Over 4 million. And, as you know better than anybody, due to all your intense work in Michigan to get that Rare Disease Advisory Council going. But the Orphan Drug Act has really helped advance by incentivizing the development of rare disease drugs. But literally, I think there's, maybe 800 FDA-approved drugs now for 400 rare diseases. Remember, there are 10,000. So it means literally to this today, there are still 95% of rare diseases have no FDA-approved therapy. And the cost of that is really high. The Every Life Foundation has done a study, and it costs about, on average, almost $250,000 per person to reach a rare disease diagnosis, usually, preceded by 7 specialist visits, hospital stays because there's no cause, so they don't know what to do to intervene. So there's a lot to be said when people say, oh, rare, but it affects so few people. No, it is 1 out of 10 people, and it's really expensive to not know. And while rare disease therapies may be expensive, when you think 95% of people are going through that diagnostic journey, it's, a tragedy that's going on every day.
It is. And, I wonder out loud, and we need to work with the insurance companies, and that's part of what the RDAC does and what we all want to do. But I do wonder, do they not realize the money that would be saved if there could be faster diagnosis? Because it really would save all of us so much money in the end.
That's an issue on every level with so many diseases now. And I wonder out loud myself about, in the old days, which, how quickly technology is advancing, like 5 years ago, it was so expensive to do genotyping and just have the whole genome sequencing. And, for many people with rare diseases, that is the only way they're going to get to the answer, get to the diagnosis. And, it is my fervent hope that because that is so vital and because it is, people know how to do it now, that it can be done very economically, because I think that for all sorts of diseases, early diagnosis of cancer, diagnosis of rare diseases, CF, that this could actually help a lot of people to reach that diagnosis. There's just the human thing that anybody who is suffering deserves a diagnosis and any potential for treatment to reduce suffering. So there's the human level. But, many people just want to talk in dollars. And I do believe if we had better screening, earlier intervention, that has to translate to savings for many people.
I agree. 1,000,000%. And was there more legislation on the federal level you wanted to bring up before we talk about people of color and...
Well, just, as, a reminder to everybody, 501c3s, if we were to be involved with anything, we're not endorsing any candidate, obviously.
Right.
But we are able to become engaged with issues that impact our disease group, our patient population, including, more broadly rare disease, including even cancer. We can circle back to that about the high rates of cancer in our community, and that we align ourselves with issues that are bipartisan. Mm-hmm. And obviously, health issues, there is no blue, there is no red. It is a human issue, a human condition. And so at the federal level, things that we've been following were the Help Copays Act, which is an issue, a movement, legislation to ban the use of copay accumulator policies in insurance plans. And whenever I say copay accumulator policy, people's eyes usually glaze over. But in the end, what it is that if my daughter has assistance to access one of her CF drugs and she uses that and it allows her to access her drugs, it should be applying toward her deductible because it's money. And with these new policies, pharmacies are accepting, and pharmacy benefit managers accepting that assistance, but not applying it to a deductible or out of pocket. And I know you know this, but in case people who are listening don't. And so what ends up happening is you think that you've met the deductible by virtue of that financial assistance. And so now you'll be able to manage access because you're just paying your copay. And yet people are being shocked to find, oh, no, you still owe your $3,000 deductible. And so unlike medical care, you do not leave the pharmacy with your medications unless you can pay. And so a lot of people are now, spreading out their medications because they don't have the funds to access them and pay down that deductible. So that's their efforts within individual states. About 20 states have banned these policies. There's also legislation at the federal level that is still in the works moving forward. And then, there are other things that are so important to our community and to many other diseases that involve respiratory disease, which is the SOAR Act, which is a Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Act. The way things are set now, and what people can get away with is just literally paying for like the big tanks and no liquid oxygen. So people who could be fully functioning, including employed members of our community, if they had access to liquid oxygen that they could take, it's compact, it's light. They don't have access to that now. And people are literally tethered to tanks in their homes because they can't access it. So this is a fully bipartisan piece of legislation that we hope also will advance.
And that is, something that I just learned about recently, months ago, from you and Emily Kramer-Golenkoff of Emily's Entourage, and I can't believe it. So that, like you said, I just want to say it again because it seems unbelievable to me that they can only have the big tanks that tether them to their house. They cannot get portable tanks so they can go into the workforce or get around easier. That will not be covered.
Yes. I mean, sometimes they can get the concentrators, but those are huge. You are stuck at home, basically. And you've got your leash for your tubing to your tank or your concentrator. So in American Lung Association, American Thoracic Society, there are lots of people rallying behind this because it is such an important quality of life issue. And then there's another act that is about multi-cancer early detection. This comes back to the advancements we've made in screening and to try and get that included in Medicare, which will benefit, could translate to Medicaid programs. But in particular with Medicare specifically, our people are starting to age out. They are actually, some people pondering Medicare. And our community has very high rates of cancer. And one of the blessings of all the improvements in our new therapies is that people are living longer. But with that comes the emergence of obviously complications that any of us would have because aging is a thing and more things happen the older you get.
Right.
But some of these things are actually exacerbated by a CF diagnosis. And we never really came to understand those before because the cases were so few. But now we do know, like in the area of colon cancer, that people with CF have 5 to 10 times the rates of colon cancer as the general population. And post-transplant, when you're on immunosuppressants, it is 25 to 30 times the rates. So we're learning that pancreatic cancer, higher rates. We're now seeing higher rates of breast cancer amongst younger women with CF. And then the other one that's really presenting is cervical cancer, and particularly for people post-transplant. If you've had HPV and you have no your immune system is completely suppressed, you don't reject your lungs, there are no breaks on the development of dysplasia then to cancer. We're starting to understand, we always think of CFTR and the defective CFTR protein. That is the root cause of CF. It is. But we always think about it as like that fluid transfer between cells and the thick, sticky mucus that emerges in our lungs and all the ducts and in the pancreas. But another role of that CFTR protein is as a tumor suppressor. So it's, we're learning more. And so if you have 2 copies of that defective gene, its impact as a tumor suppressor is defective. So it stands to reason there will be higher rates of cancer. And looking at you, my friend Laura, who is a CF carrier, I'm a CF carrier. Obviously, we have kids with CF. But we also, by virtue of having one copy, have higher rates of cancer too. So I just like to always let the carriers realize that screenings are critically important for carriers as well.
They are. And plus, my husband's family has a higher rate of colon cancer. So we have let our doctors know. And I mean, obviously for the girls, but as well as us. And our doctors, both of our doctors, even though I'm a Teicher, not a Bonnell by blood, they are screening us every 5 years. So they changed that for us based on this information because it is scary. And even though, Anna Payne, for example, who has CF, and she really raised awareness about this, and CFRI, you've helped her with that, giving her a platform too. But they need to screen younger, but there's nothing official yet on this, right? So does that mess up with insurance? Are people able to get screening at a younger age?
Well, obviously insurance, that is the big key. Do I believe people should be screened at 30? Yes, I do. And
I do too.
There's probably both sides, but there is a higher cancer risk, colon cancer risk specifically for Tess and by genetics. So not CF genetics, colon cancer genetics.
Right.
And so she's 30 this year. She'll probably get her first colonoscopy. And obviously for people, what's so challenging is that GI issues are massive for most people with CF. And in fact, like years ago when we did that FDA hearing and we did a big survey of the community, and GI issues ranked as high as respiratory issues as a day-to-day sort of inhibitor of quality of life. So I was like, remind me, think of the lungs all the time, because obviously that is what most people die from, is respiratory failure. But the GI issues are so serious. And so people, I think it's easy to ignore colon cancer symptoms. And I know several people who have told me that's what happened. They delayed really even talking about it with the doctor. Having spoken with somebody who's more in the know about insurance reimbursement and payers and process, what I was told is that if you have a doctor who hears you, who understands this far higher risk that you have, and if you say, I am having symptoms that are outside the lane of my normal GI symptoms that I typically have, and you really push that symptoms are worse, typically most payers will cover it. You have to have a doctor who's not going to disregard, like, oh, it's probably just CF stuff. If you have a care provider who is hearing you and listening, they will submit it that this is not about GI symptoms. This specifically is a necessary screening, in which case payers typically will pay. Now on another, related to that topic though.
Yes.
My own personal segue here. I don't know if you saw today the Kaiser Family Foundation report that came out about,
I didn't see it yet. No.
Payers, healthcare.gov insurers. So, this is through the Obamacare, all these plans, which have been, so remarkably important for many people who would otherwise be unable to have coverage. But they did a whole analysis of claims and denials in 2023 that found nearly 1 in 5 in-network claims. These aren't people who are going out of network. 1 in 5 in-network claims was denied. And of those 1 in 5, if they broke it down by different states and insurers within, some had as low of a denial rate as 1%. I'm like, who are those people? But we love them. But some were as high as 35%, over 1 out of 3.
Wow.
Now, the other thing I gleaned from this report, which is like the next thing I want to do in terms of a webinar, is just how do you interpret what you hear from your insurance company? And if you disagree with it because you've been denied, what are the steps you can take? Concrete steps. I'm committed to this because out of that 1 out of 5 denials, only 1% were appealed.
Wow. And that is because they are immersed in their disease or their situation and their life, and they're overwhelmed. And probably they don't understand 98% of what's happening, which is so frustrating, as you know, because we live it.
And just to really let people know that frontline, it's either now AI, you've been run through an AI program and the denial came, or it is somebody who has no medical background, really, typically, is the first line. And that everybody should always appeal straight up. So it ends up, of the 1% of the people that did appeal, still over half were denied again. And the most common reason for all of these denials, the most common reason cited, other.
Oh my gosh.
Other.
That is sinful,
so
honestly. It's the nicest way I can say it.
Yeah. So, and I share this not to depress everybody, but because these are the things that as an organization we want to pay attention to so that we can help our community have the tools, because all of us are going to have more claims. That's the given. So what do we do in response to denials for something you know is vitally important for yourself or your loved one? That's coming down the pike this year, because people really need to have the self-advocacy tools.
Yeah, that is great. And we will share everything about your webinar when you get it together. I appreciate that. And that takes us right to CFRI to learn more about your foundation and what you do, because you do so many things. So wherever you want to start with what you're working on.
Well, I'll start with, for people who don't know much about us, that we this year are celebrating 50 years since we were formed.
Yay,
so
1975.
We were formed in Palo Alto by a group of parents, all of whom had kids with CF, none of whom, based on that year, were expected to really, if they made it through high school, not expected to live much longer than that. So they decided they wanted to do their own work to raise funds and provide these grants to researchers, do their own vetting, decide what they wanted to fund. So their first grant they ever gave was to our wonderful mutual friend, Dr. Paul Quinton. And for listeners, if you don't know who Paul Quinton is, I joke to him that I am his wingwoman in terms of PR because he's so humble.
He is
but
so humble.
He made some of the most pivotal discoveries about CF. And Dr. Quinton has CF himself. He did many of the experiments, literally taking the cells from his own arms and legs to use in the lab. So that was our first grant in 1977. And, I just love saying that because that is really evident of what was to come for CFRI. We don't have huge grants to give to people. I mean, God love the CFF and the NIH and the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine and places that can give the larger grants. That is not our role. It's to give people, $75,000 for a couple of years, and they can add to that from other sources, but to provide seed funding for a concept. And we have an incredible track record of people getting these smaller grants, having the proof of concept, and then moving on to much larger grants from other sources. So that's one piece of what we do. And the other sections, I always describe CFRI as by and for the CF community. It was formed by parents of people with CF. It is now my board of directors. Everybody has a connection to CF, whether they are adults with CF, spouses, parents, relatives, whether they're CF pulmonologists, CF researchers. So everybody comes ready to roll up their sleeves, very, very passionate, dedicated, mission-driven team of people. And then we have lots of committees, and all those committees are almost in their entirety staffed or with volunteers who are either adults with CF or family members of those with CF. And so within our organization, research is in our name, so I always start with that. But we have three other areas that we really focus on. One is education. And I know you'll be helping to promote our conference that we hold every summer. We're having our 38th National CF Education Conference this summer. It is hybrid, so people can come to Mountain View and enjoy all the joy that is that conference, because it's not just the presentations, it's all the other activities around it. But it is also hybrid, so people can sign on and watch at no cost and hear all the great information.
It's one of my favorite events. It's the camaraderie, the knowledge, the love. Honestly, as you remember, I cried, couldn't stop crying. The first one I went to, I was so moved by everything. I literally couldn't. Every time I tried to speak, I just started crying because it was so overwhelmingly beautiful. And yes, if you can attend, I highly recommend doing the hybrid. It's incredible.
Thank you for saying that, Laura. And I will say, I was really lucky when Tess was diagnosed. Very shortly after her diagnosis, I was in clinic at Stanford with her, and there was a flyer for the conference. And I think that year it was the 8th annual. I have never missed a conference since 1995. So, and we're having our 38th conference this summer. But why it brought me back and why that was actually my walking through the CFRI door where I took up residence, because when I went to that conference, it wasn't just that I all of a sudden had so much great information from experts from around the nation presenting, but I met other people who were walking the CF path. Joy was possible. It was like an eye-opening thing to connect with other people, learn all this information, and then see that you actually could laugh and see hope more clearly in front of you. It set me on the CFRI path. Some other things, we have a newsletter printed in Spanish and English. We do podcasts. We do a weekly e-newsletter. And I would say to listeners, go to CFRI.org, sign up for the newsletter, because every Wednesday you'll get a whole dose of information. And it's not just about CFRI's programs. We want to promote all of our fellow CF organizational partners, all their programs. We have research updates. We have advocacy updates. So there's just a lot you can glean from it. So if you only do one thing, just sign up for that newsletter.
And we have it in show notes too, so people can go in there and just get directly to you. So
Thank you. So we do retreats. We do retreats for mothers of children and adults with CF. I could talk about that for a long time, but it's a really powerful weekend spent together in California. We do retreats for adults with CF, and I like to add that in this era, cross-infection awareness, obviously, CFRI has never subscribed to the one person with CF per room philosophy, which is not to say that we say we're having an event, come on down. We have very stringent protocols to help keep people safe. And because of that, we do offer every year an on-site 5-day retreat for adults with CF. And we are now in our, 25th year of doing this. We morphed from camps and then navigated to come up with the protocols to create retreat. And it has been just such a positive experience for so many adults with CF.
And I have to comment on that too, because I haven't seen the one that's solely for people with CF. Obviously, I don't have CF. My girls do. But whenever I go to your conferences, I think you do it better than anyone in the United States as far as that goes, because people with CF aren't serving themselves, but no one is. So it's not like you're calling out people and, making anybody feel uncomfortable that has CF. Like everybody is served, so there isn't the touching of utensils, like basic things. And whoever wants to wear a mask wears one. It's such a safe place that way. And I just feel the community is so respectful. And for those people who've never been around someone else who has CF, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So,
there are people who save up their time, their money, just because they would say the retreat, or for some people, the conference, the most important activity they do every year. Mm-hmm. And, just the cliff notes of it, people do have to have cultures. There are certain pathogens. If you've had them, you cannot come. There are certain pathogens you have to have had a certain time period. Your doctor has to sign off. So there are steps. And the other part of it is that you have to be willing to self-identify, because I think part of the problem with events where I think there are events where there are not supposed to be more than one person with CF, but there is, but nobody can self-identify because there's only supposed to be one person. And so the way we have it, everybody on their name badge has a blue dot if they have CF, because it allows people with CF to say, I see you, I want to talk to you, but we're going to be able to keep our 6-foot distance. And, so nobody has that fear that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I've been sitting there having this intense conversation with somebody nose to nose, and I didn't realize they had CF too. Anyway, so that's a whole other topic. And so let me move to the psychosocial support.
Please.
Quickly, our psychosocial support programs, we know our community has higher rates of depression and anxiety. And so we also know it's very hard to access therapy in the United States. And so we will cover people's individual therapy sessions, 6 sessions, and very easy to sign up for that. For most people in our program, last year, about 85 people took advantage of the service. And for most people, it was the only therapy they had access to all year was through this program. And then we have 9 very robust online support groups every month, and you can find where you fit. Are you the parent of a child, a parent of an adult, a spouse of an adult? Are you an adult post-transplant? Are you an adult who can't use modulators? Are you a teen? Have you lost a loved one to CF? Are you an adult with a late diagnosis? So people can find where they fit and find community there every month. So we encourage people to participate in that as well. And then we also have a wonderful member of our community, serves on our board of directors, who's a medical doctor, retired, who has CF, who leads mindfulness meditation sessions. So we'll be offering seminars through the year with her. And so those are the 3 pillars. The final one, advocacy and awareness. And I could do a whole separate thing just on this issue, but the one thing I'm really going to focus on now is the awareness. And obviously we've talked about awareness as it being a rare disease. But another key, and then we've talked about awareness of the high rates of cancer. But the other area where we're very engaged with awareness efforts is in the issue of diversity. And I know that's a very charged term, especially this week as we're reading about all the changes that are going on. But in the CF world, one's race and ethnicity can be entirely linked to one's health outcomes. And so that is something that, this is not about, using other people's terms, woke politics or what have you. It is about uplifting our community and helping to identify people who have been suffering for years because they have not been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And for many years, CF was perceived as a disease of Caucasian people of European descent. And textbooks, it was just like this ongoing sort of mythology, because Dorothy Anderson, who discovered the disease in her original case notes, had very diverse children who had passed away from CF. And in our country, there is a state-to-state variance on newborn screening panels. Until recently, one state literally only screened for one mutation, the most common one among people of European descent.
And still, they're not even screening for that many more. They've improved.
And people of color are more likely to have rare mutations that are not being detected on newborn screening panels. So there's no early intervention. So you have infections, inflammation, failure to gain weight, all the things that come with CF. And yet they're being misdiagnosed with asthma, irritable bowel syndrome, all these other issues. Oh, maybe is it Crohn's? Is it, so they go through this long diagnostic journey. And even though it's right in front, quite often, it would seem to us, because we know too much, it's so obvious they have CF. But people are not seeing it because of the unconscious bias. It's not intentional. But how they've been trained in medical school, what is the message about who has CF? So we are very engaged in helping communities of color say, these are symptoms. If you have these, this might be something you raise this issue with your doctor to screen for. We also really want people who have been diagnosed to have resources. If they speak Spanish, they deserve to have the information that they need to encourage better outcomes for themselves or their loved ones. And so, that is something, this is a human issue. This is about improving health outcomes. This is about seeing our whole community and being a welcome and inclusive place. And that is something I think we should all ascribe to achieve, that nobody should be moving back from this important goal.
Right. It's so important, but it affects their life expectancy. It impacts everything. And yeah, it's just so important. And on our CF Familia page, we have a link to CFRI's Spanish-speaking support groups. Mm-hmm. So it's so important. And we could go on and talking about so many people we know that are persons of color that were diagnosed late and the harm that it did to them, both mentally and physically. It's so painful to see how it continues to impact them. And if you don't have a diagnosis, you can't get the right medications, you can't get insurance coverage, et cetera, et cetera. Siri, I love you.
I love you, Laura.
And we could talk for many more hours on this podcast, but it just means we'll have to do another one. But your contact information is in show notes. And every time I say your name, my iPad keeps lighting up for Siri, So
I have not had a meeting since the iPhone came out. Somebody's phone does not ping.
Right. It's so funny. But what would you like to leave us with before we wrap up this podcast? Because we've touched on so many things.
For many people, we're in a period of transition in terms of sort of the state of healthcare, and that nobody should be rattled. We know what we need to do. We need to advance research. We need to stay connected as a community. We need to do what it takes to improve health outcomes. We need to do what it takes to reduce isolation. And that there are just so many ways to engage with so many different CF-related organizations. And whether it's you're involved with one or with 10, it's what you need. And it is uplifting. It's so, stay connected to people. And I hope you will reach out to CFRI, whatever we have to offer that is of service to you. We are happy to offer. And we'd also love to, engage with you. And Laura, it is always such a delight to see you personally, but professionally. The work you do is so important, and I am really grateful to you for helping bring a voice to the community and allow me to share my thoughts.
Well, thank you, Siri, and a very wise way to end it, just about talking about keeping it together and just working with other people. Is very smart. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Laura.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, The Science of Possibility, and Viatris. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.